Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for February 23rd through March 1st, 2025. There have been a lot of things that have happened this week. As you guys have known, it's continually a crazy time. However, I don't want to waste your time by dragging out things that have already kind of been discussed. So let's move through some of this stuff pretty quickly. Last week's concern regarding aviation incidents has really continued. However, this week we have had really just more along the lines of routine kinds of things. For instance, out of New York, American Airlines Flight 292, which was bound for Delhi, was diverted to Rome in Italy for a bomb threat that was somehow transmitted to American Airlines. Either way, the aircraft was diverted to Rome for a security inspection. Nothing was found, and the aircraft continued on to Delhi. I have seen a lot of testimony from people who have flown this particular long-haul flight a few times before, and they've said that this has happened several times before. I could not find any reference to that, but several people are saying that this particular flight, especially ones going into Delhi from major world cities around the globe, tend to have bomb threats on them occasionally. Either way, this one was kind of diffused, even though it got kind of a lot of press coverage due to being intercepted by military aircraft while it was being diverted to Rome. Similar situation in New Jersey. A rather viral video showed FedEx flight FDX 3609 with one of their engines on fire, rather concerningly so. This was the result of a bird strike on takeoff. So once again, fairly standard operation, even though it looks quite concerning from the ground. This was a fairly routine thing, so they returned to the airport. All is well. Everything went to plan with regards to the emergency response. Something a little bit more out of the ordinary this week, we had two incidents of a Delta aircraft. The first one was Delta Flight 876, which was a regional flight bound for Columbia, South Carolina. Once again, smoke filling the cabin. No real explanation of what happened or why this happened. However, the emergency procedures were carried out in accordance with essentially what you were supposed to do. Aircraft landed without incident. Several passengers were treated at the scene for smoke inhalation, but other than that, it was fairly standard. What made this one kind of sketchy for a lot of people this week is that there was another flight out of California, another Delta flight, that also had smoke filling the cabin. I don't have any images of that or really much more information than that. However, a lot of people thought it was kind of sketchy that Delta had two smoke-filled passenger cabin incidents roughly on the same day. So I don't know what all that's about. The two aircraft were two separate airframes. There really isn't probably going to be very much we can learn from that. And once again, with all of these aircraft incidents, it's going to largely be up to you as to whether or not you're going to decide, is this out of the norm? And is the data that we are capturing and logging on these types of incidents, is that data actually helping us make an assessment, or is it really just not helping us very much? Again, that's all on you to decide. Before we move on, I quickly wanted to mention something that I think is going to be very quickly forgotten, and that is the recent sort of scandal or concerns with the U.S. bullion depository at Fort Knox in Kentucky. This is one of the oldest conspiracy theories in the U.S. Regarding Fort Knox. Essentially, the theory goes that, Fort Knox has secretly been emptied out and there's no more gold there. This has happened many times throughout American history, these concerns coming about, because obviously it's not something that you can publicly view, right? So one of the more recent concerns kind of came to a head in 1974, in which case the U.S. government opened up the Fort Knox vaults and showed the public that the gold is still there. Brought in a lot of journalists and things like that. But Fort Knox has not participated in any kind of audit or media coverage or any kind of proof showing operation since then. So the White House and the sort of Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, so Trump and Musk, decided, hey, this would be a very quick thing to kind of get off people's minds, and a very quick little audit. Just take a trip to Fort Knox and see if the gold's still there and show it to the cameras and hopefully independent media. As you might expect, current events that we're going to talk about here in a moment have backburnered this issue, understandably so. However, you can't just really bring up Fort Knox and one of the most substantial conspiracy theories, in U.S. history, and then never address it again and hope that people just kind of forgot about it. It does nothing but fuel distrust. So I did want to keep it fresh in people's minds. So it would be a very quick and easy thing to do, and I guess we'll have to see if this gets readdressed again at some point in time when things calm down a little bit. So moving over to the fiasco that everyone is talking about in Washington, D.C., many things have transpired this week. There have been several state visits to the White House over the past week or so, most notably the United Kingdom and Ukraine. So once again, the whole internet is abuzz with the fiasco at the White House yesterday afternoon involving President Zelensky of Ukraine. I would encourage everyone to watch the 45-50-minute full coverage of the dialogue between President Trump and President Zelensky if you have the time. It adds a little bit more context, but just in case you didn't want to do that, the short Cliff Notes version is that Zelensky showed up with a different idea in mind regarding how the discussions would go. Just to delineate my personal opinion on why this particular engagement occurred, I think that Zelensky hasn't had a world leader ever push back on him. I think that the answer has always been to his personal presence, has been to give him more money. So the very first time that a world leader pushed back on it, pushed back on that kind of attitude, it didn't go very well. So following that incident, there are multiple reports of how it goes. Again, this is all just basically celebrity gossip at this point. There are many reports that state or indicate that Zelensky was thrown out of the White House against his will. President Trump has confirmed this general sentiment via statements with the press. Once again, we're in the world of diplomacy here. It's not like Trump's going to say, "Get the hell out of my house," kind of thing. It's going to be handled a little bit more delicately than that. But the message was certainly conveyed to his team that he needs to leave. As one can probably guess, this marks a very sharp departure from prior American sentiment on the war, and it resulted in a lot of things happening really all at once. So some of the things that have occurred sort of in the same realm, let's not forget that this has been brewing for some time. For instance, a lot of the mainstream media articles have mentioned that USAID and the U.S. government through USAID has pulled their financial funding for a restoration of Ukraine's electrical grid. Well, this was not a result of what happened yesterday. This funding pull was already scheduled many, many days prior to this, right around the time frame that Zelensky started to get a little mouthy with regards to not being invited to the peace table with regards to meeting with Russian delegations in Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago, if you guys remember that. Zelensky got a little upset about that, and the United States tried to pressure him by removing, a very easy thing to do, which is USAID funding. One of the more interesting things that occurred, which I think is purely more of a canary in the coal mine with regards to what Congress thinks now, is that Senator Lindsey Graham has essentially turned on Zelensky. Again, like I wrote, very delicately and very carefully worded, you're going to see a lot of daggers come out, and this is one of the bigger canaries, if you know what I mean. So Senator Lindsey Graham, for many of you, especially the Europeans who probably don't know, Senator Lindsey Graham is probably one of the biggest war hawks in Congress. This is an indisputable fact. He is the most pro-war congressman that there is, especially when it comes to Ukraine. He has been one of the ones who has gotten a lot of visible gratification from this war, and him turning on Zelensky when he was one of Zelensky's closest allies in the United States, that's a very big indicator of what is to come with regards to Ukraine essentially being dropped by the U.S. I have also seen some limited reporting from various, not quite Ukrainian media, because Ukrainian media doesn't really exist in its most free form, I should say, I guess. But sort of Eastern European media has claimed that impeachment articles have been filed in Ukraine to oust Zelensky. I don't know if that's true or not. I would not be surprised in the slightest. I would be honestly quite surprised if Zelensky got on his plane and actually flew back to Ukraine. It might not be in Zelensky's best interest to go back to his country at this point. That's how badly this incident happened, but I guess we will have to see. On the other side of the aisle, I have seen the reports from the Secretary of Defense, or rather just kind of through the grapevine, so it's not like we have the physical order itself, but there have been reports that the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has ordered U.S. Cybercom to stop essentially all hostile hacking actions against Russia. I don't know if that's true or not. There's no way to verify it either way, because one, I didn't think we were supposed to admit publicly that we did that sort of thing, even though, we obviously do. And I don't think that Russia is going to reciprocate. I don't know. They might. I don't know. But when it comes to the world of cyber, everyone is spying on each other. Everyone is conducting DDoS attacks against each other. It's very clear that everybody's just kind of in a war with everyone else, especially if you're adversaries. So whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's what happens. If we're going to start essentially letting our foot off the gas with regards to Russia, then that is a very serious change in policy with regards to the Ukrainian war. So we'll have to see how it works out. We probably won't know, but I guess it will be very, very interesting times indeed. I'm also seeing limited reporting this morning, again from mainstream media articles, which are completely untrustworthy, but I have no other sources. I've seen limited reporting that the U.S. is essentially just, we're done with Ukraine. I don't know if that's true or not, but I did just want to mention it because if this is true, and if the U.S. is going to really pivot away from Ukraine so as to achieve a peace deal without really involving Ukrainian leadership, or at least Zelensky himself, then things are going to happen very, very quickly. We're going to see a lot of things happen very quickly. And we have seen this in Europe. Essentially, pretty much every single European leader has come out and said, we're going to support Ukraine as best we can because the United States is, well, we're bad guys now, right? Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that actually works out because, wishing does not make it so. It's not going to happen. Strongly worded emails and shows of solidarity and putting a Ukrainian flag in your bio on social media, that's not going to churn out artillery shells in a factory somewhere. It's just not going to happen. Most of the munitions that are making a difference in Ukraine, as in all of the munitions that are making a difference in Ukraine, are American made. So I don't know what Europe is hoping to do here other than just prolong the fighting, but a lot of people are going to be very, very, very upset by what they read and hear over the next few days, weeks, months with regards to the Ukrainian war. And I don't just mean the leftists, political leftists here in the United States. I think a lot of conservatives are going to be very, very upset too. But we can get to that at a later time. A lot closer to home, let's talk about the situation in Lincoln Heights, Ohio. Like I mentioned last week and the week before, the situation continues to deteriorate, and now it's essentially more or less a textbook case of an insurgency, if I'm allowed to say that in the court of public opinion. I know that it's a small area, but I have continued to update the map as best I can, and will continue to do so as long as this stays a problem, mostly because this is expanding as you might expect, right? The power vacuum, like I said a couple weeks ago, has not been addressed. The authorities kind of abandoned this area years ago. The police department shut down and rolled into other jurisdictions, but it's we're now starting to see the rapid expansion phase of insurgency type operations, and now it's starting to threaten the nearby township of Evandale across the interstate there. So again, you guys can check out the map. You can click around and see what's happening. There's not that much data on it. I will admit it's not that good of a project, but you got to remember that really only the extreme far left media groups are going to these places and are allowed to go in there because the people in this area, which is expanding by the day, are restricting access to certain people. This is the kind of thing that happens. We just have intelligence gaps all around, and we just have to do the best we can with the information that we're given. But I did want to keep it fresh in everyone's minds, not necessarily because this is going to expand like a lot. I mean, it will probably continue to expand into the local area, but let's face it, criminal gangs in the United States are very much different than, say, like the Taliban or Al-Qaeda or ISIS. They're just not the same in terms of the capabilities and threats they provide. Now, it doesn't mean that it's all hunky-dory, but I'm not entirely concerned about Lincoln Heights taking over the whole state of Ohio, if you know what I mean. However, this is a case study. This is a good learning opportunity because you're allowed to see how insurgent groups form in real time on American soil. This is a very interesting case to follow, so that's kind of why I'm following it. But once again, we will just have to wait and see how it all turns out. So far, really all we can do is just watch because the authorities are definitely not interested in doing anything at all. As a matter of fact, the legal and lawful authorities, say the city council, mayor of Lincoln Heights, they are the ones that are helping drive this. So watching the interesting dynamic between, say, the gang members on the streets with guns and the political leadership of the area that was elected, right? You see this dynamic forming, and you see how cohesion helps keep all of this together. It's not just gang members, recruiting more and more people. There is a hierarchy here. There is a lot more organization than people might want to think. Now, how much there is up for debate, but it will be very interesting to see how this develops and how other communities start responding to it. Moving out west, we have another cable cutting incident, or in this case, a cable disruption incident. We're not really sure if it was cut or not, or if it was some sort of natural disruption, but this cable affected an American cable network. This was the internet cable providing internet services through the Quintillion network to the northwestern parts of Alaska. So right now, a lot of northwestern Alaska is without internet connectivity. There are also some cellular networks that have been affected as well. But once again, Alaska, northern Alaska especially, is a very, very remote part of the world. So there's not that many people that are up there. And many of the people who are already up there have things like Starlink. So judging the impact is going to be something that's hard to do. When it comes to what caused the cable outage or disruption or cutting, like I said, the repair company, they actually can't get up there because there is ice pack. So the company itself said that it's going to take several weeks for the ice pack to clear to be able to get up there to actually, one, assess the damage, and two, fix it. So a lot of northwestern Alaska is going to be without internet access for many weeks. So again, this is not something that's going to be a quick fix at all. So that is something to consider as time moves on. Also out west, I wanted to very quickly mention the Tesla dealership terrorism incident. As many of you have probably seen all over social media, due to Elon Musk's association with the Tesla company and Starlink and SpaceX and things like this, and also his association with the U.S. government, Doge, and being a personal friend of President Trump, this has garnered him a lot of criticism and a lot of outrage amongst various groups. And over the past few weeks, there have been a lot of attacks that have taken place at Tesla dealerships. A lot of owners of Tesla vehicles have been vandalized, things like that. In this case, this was a serial sort of vandalism spree that was possibly carried out by just a single person. So this person, Lucy Grace Nelson, you can see the photograph here, was arrested a few days ago for essentially planting explosives and incendiary devices at a Tesla dealership there in Loveland, just north of Denver. I thought this was kind of an interesting case because the same exact thing happened on January 29th, February 2nd, and February 7th. So this is the fourth time that a very similar thing happened at the exact same Tesla dealership. Once again, this looks like a very standard boilerplate example of domestic terrorism. A lot of the mainstream media are saying that this was a woman who conducted these attacks due to the name and apparently the inability to see the photograph of the person who was arrested very obviously being a man. So that's a very interesting but not entirely unexpected development, but once again, it's not something that is particularly uncommon. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Let's talk a little bit about the GhostNet Reports. This week was pretty good. I unfortunately tuned in a little bit late. I was working on some other stuff and missed my own radio network, which has happened. It happens sometimes. But I did catch a lot of people who were talking about linking up and doing emails and things like that and exchanging information. I caught a few partial reports who were from a few people who were very far away from me, and I'm not entirely certain what they were talking about. A few weather reports here and there, but I did get one guy who was transmitting the wire, and I think it was shortened. I try to make the Thursday night wire reports rather short, however, so that it's easy for people to do that over the radio, but a lot of times I fail and I forget. So I know there are better ways of doing this. There are better ways of doing pretty much all of this. However, again, trying to have a balance of lowest common denominator plus the ease of access plus the ease of use, and it's kind of a good blend. So it's not the best way, but it does work, as you can see here, for exchanging long blocks of text. So that's all I have for today. Here are the sources for this week. Once again, you can get all of these sources in a clickable format based on the actual report for every day on my Obsidian page, which makes it a little bit easier to share the sources that I'm using to write each report. And just as a reminder, I do update my sort of SIPCOP maps on ArcGIS. I've got a couple of different maps on ArcGIS. Again, all the links are on my Obsidian page, but throughout the week you may sneak a peek of me editing some things and updating things throughout the week as I work on some projects that are work in progress. So I will continue that. I will hope to have some more helpful products next week with regards to the border crisis, but right now I'm just kind of crunching through a lot of data, and we will see what next week brings. So thank you guys all for watching. Thank you again for all of your support, which makes all of this possible, and I will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.